It was a 26-hour flight from Sydney to Madrid via Singapore and Paris. It was a lovely sunny morning when we got there, so a walk through the park to shake off the jet lag and a quick lunch at one of Madrid's famous jambon or ham restaurants seemed like a good idea after all that awful airplane food. In economy class, in the park we saw the famous statue of Don Quixote astride his horse Rocinante with his squire Sancho on a donkey. Leaving the park, we walked up Madrid's most fashionable street, the Gran Via, and beyond, until we found the specialist jambon restaurant we'd been recommended to go to. And this is it. Hanging from the ceiling were masses of highly prized ham, which had aged for many years. And a lovely cleansing ale to accompany a snack of several very aged hams. This man was clearly a poker machine addict. It was good, except that the noise level in the restaurant was really high, as you could hear. The array of specialist preserved meats on display was really mouthwatering. A homeless man has moved on the Gran Via, and Whoopi Goldberg was starring at the theatre. Being the high fashion mecca in Madrid, the Gran Via was a good place for window shopping for a jet-lagged visitor, which Marjorie very much enjoyed. Tax-free they might be, but there's really nothing there we really wanted to buy. Footpath stalls were selling books, pamphlets and paintings, but we didn't want any of those either. Next day was time to do some real exploring in Madrid, starting with the beautiful Campo del Moro, at the rear of the Palacio Real, or the Royal Palace. This was a beautiful spot with some wonderful gardens, and above all, real peace and quiet in this busy city. We had earlier discussed whether we should revisit the magnificent Prado Museum, but we had already seen this some 20 years earlier, and decided instead to have this lovely walk before that exploring the interior of the Palacio Real itself. As stated earlier, this was actually at the rear of the Palacio Real, and there is no entry to the palace from here. We go there later, as you will see. This was just a beautiful parkland in which to wander and charge one's batteries. It was good. Rising above the constant traffic noise in the background, throughout the park there was the beautiful twittering of the birds in the foliage around us. The floral displays also very clearly show that it was springtime in Madrid, a lovely time of year, almost anywhere in the world. And here in Madrid, springtime is said to be the very best time of year by the locals. But now it's time to go. and we're walking right around the block to the front of the palace. Madrid's Palacio Real, or Royal Palace, is by far the largest and said to be the finest palace in the whole of Europe, reflecting those times when Spain was by far the dominant and wealthiest country in the world. And this immense palace clearly shows how they spent that wealth. And Philip II is revered as the king who made Spain the wealthiest country in the world. With its many huge courtyards, the palace is immense, and the treasures within are beyond belief. We were fortunate enough to time our tour with an English-speaking guide.
Fireproof palace, and it was a record that the Guinness doesn't have, but is the first fireproof building. It took 26 years to do, with two architects, Juvara, whose architectural exhibition you can see going out on the right, and Sacchetti. And in the 1764, his son Charles III inaugurated Palacio. Since,
unfortunately, at times her voice was not strong enough to be clearly heard, but what we have recorded here is worth listening to. These images were recorded on 30-year-old analogue tape, and sadly there is some deterioration which shows up as white lines across the picture, but mostly it does not detract too much from enjoying the image on screen. There were magnificent woven silk tapestries and paintings everywhere. The light levels in the throne room are quite low to protect its treasures from fading due to too much light, but it is truly magnificent, with gilding everywhere. These are the twin gilded thrones for the king and queen, and in front are the lions, with their four paws on the world, which Spain controlled at that time for sure. The collection of magnificent paintings by Goya, which feature almost everywhere around the palace, are said to be even better than the wonderful collection of Goya paintings in the Prado Museum itself. This was the time when Spain had more gold than any other country on earth, most of it of course stolen from the Incas in South America. But Seeing Spain had it all, a lot of it was used to provide gilding everywhere during construction of this wonderful palace. Throughout the palace there was also ornate chandeliers, heavily encrusted with the finest gemstones from all around the world, brought back to Spain by the conquistadors during their heyday. Just think about it, this magnificent chandelier and the wonderful painted ceiling above it. Surely the most ornate display of wealth one could see anywhere. And it goes on and on and on.
And she shouted like a Napolitan mama, you know. And after that we like her, which is much more. This is the King of Scotland. If you're British, you probably... And this is really Don Juan. He doesn't look like a Don Juan, I'm sorry to say. But he was Don Juan, the King of Portugal, and he's painted by Japan. ¿Se acuerda usted de la reina gritando, gritando? ¿No he visto nunca? His son came, finished, trimmed, and turned it into the house of the King of Spain. He's not really precisely, doesn't look a bit like Red Butler, but he was an excellent king. He was a doer, a builder, and an organizer, something we seldom are, so we still follow his rules and you'll be following them too. And really, he doesn't look very, very handsome, but he's the best advertisement we have for cooking with olive oil. He's a good advertisement. He wouldn't mind me playing a joke because he was a man of state, so anything that was good for the state would be good for him. Probably that's why he founded that famous order of Charles III that he's wearing and has the sea, the lion, and the castle that are the symbols. He founded it under the patronage of Our Lady Mary, and that's what you see on the center of the board, the Immaculate Conception. You know, we Spaniards have always been in this more papist than 500 years. We were already, we could say, the supporters of the Immaculate Conception. Look, in Europe, after the Arabs left, nobody has washed until 30 years ago. So this is what the Italians call la saletta de passaggio. The chairs are done by Cano, the famous cabinet maker of that furniture of Gasparini room I was not able to show you. And the table is a coffee table clock that was a present to Carlos IV and that comes from the Parisian house of Somme. Beautiful marble floors.
It would be quite impossible to put any monetary value on the amazing furniture and furnishings within this sitting room alone, and the true value of the furnishings within this immense palace would be utterly beyond anybody's ability to value them. So, even today, the wealth of Spain is beyond belief. This is one of several huge banqueting rooms within the palace. This table was said to have seated 60 guests at a banquet. What an occasion that would be, in such sumptuous surroundings. A significant feature of the palace was these especially beautifully paved floors.
So the grandmothers used to get very hot because the chocolate is delicious. Here you have a toilet set that was a present from the city to Isabel de Braganza. It is done in vermeil, that silver dipped in gold that we Spaniards have adored. The French too. Both countries we love to live above our means. That's why it's very suitable for us.
The silverware alone for these state banquets would surely be worth a fortune, even today.
Es que va a estar allí mañana en el carta, si yo con ella no quiero...
Even a Stradivarius viola from the 17th century. And as we proceed through one courtyard to another building, here's an amazing collection of huge tapestries. This building has huge carvings and wonderful frescoes, and external windows bringing in natural lights from the ceiling. This was in fact a special audience room for the king to receive petitioners while he sat in an elaborate throne with a canopy above it. Out we go through the courtyard again, past huge statues of prominent people, but I'm not quite sure who they were, although this one does wear a crown and the name Fernando el Católico, whatever that really means. More superb storytelling tapestry, a story of fierce battles and gory beheadings, possibly the Spanish soldiers fighting the Moors in years gone by. This seems to be a Spaniard holding up his enemy's head, which he had just carved off the body. And here we have an ante-room, gilding everywhere, with the body of a two-headed goddess, I guess. But I didn't quite understand what it was all about, really.
Yeah.
And finally it was all over as we headed down the stairs. But then it was into an amazing armoury, showing the armour and protection the soldiers wore, and also their horses when going into battle. An amazing collection. This appears to be a headdress to cover a turban, and a breastplate to go with it, along with simpler headdresses and shields. Special headdresses for horses and dogs, large and small shields, old flintlock pistols and rifles. An unbelievable collection, which went on from room after room, over quite a large area below the palace. The collection clearly showed that the Spaniards were headed for world domination at that time. And think about what this handheld lance would do to a human body when thrust at it. How about this skirt type armour? And special armour for the accompanying dog. This is a lovely close-up of the helmet for the dog. Can't quite figure out what this implement is, but it certainly looks pretty lethal. This articulated armour for the horse's neck was quite ingenious, because it would allow quite a bit of movement of the head, but would still protect the neck against swords and arrows. This looks like a pretty lethal device mounted on the shoulder's chest, apparently designed to pierce the heart of anyone's body coming in contact with him. And here is an even more advanced version of an articulated type of armour to protect a horse. Some brilliant thinking here, and this was way back when everything was done by hand without the use of modern machines of today. And now to the Royal Pharmacy. And first a wonderful picture of how primitive medicine was in the old days. This looked more like Dante's Inferno than healthcare in the Middle Ages. Wow. Then, in contrast, we see just how well looked after King Philip II of Spain was in those days, in the Royal Pharmacy. The walls were lined from ceiling to floor with the beautifully labelled containers and vials of every medication known these days. And, as you can see, there were plenty of them, and they were beautifully stored in a huge variety of containers, each type handmade to meet a specific need. It was brilliant, and showed just how far medical care had advanced by the time of King Philip III. But undoubtedly, the man in the street, or especially the conquistador, or sailor, or soldier, expanding the interests of Spain abroad, would not get this sort of care. Apparently, there were more than 20 rooms in the pharmacy, which included laboratories in which medications were made, and the collection of remarkable glassware to allow quite sophisticated things such as vacuum distillation to be carried out in a laboratory clearly showed just how advanced this specialised medical care for the king had become, by Spain's leading doctors pictured on the wall, and how advanced the manufacture of specialised glassware in Spain had become too. Even today, this glassware would be regarded as magnificently made and probably still usable in today's laboratories. The huge variety of specialised retorts and flasks in this collection is quite astonishing, and there's also a large array of equipment designed to grind and mix solid medications too. So without doubt, the king was well looked after by the standards of the day. And was this a caricature of the devil being washed away below this wash basin in the pharmacy, at a time when witchcraft was a prevalent influence in the world? But it was time to go and learn more about the history of Spain in this fascinating part of Madrid, where so much had happened during and after the reign of King Philip II. Madrid has many historic statues. This one specifically recalls a grenade attack in the Cala Major on the carriage of Alfonso III of Spain after his wedding in Madrid in 1906, when 23 people were killed and many injured. The Plaza de la Villa is a pedestrian square facing onto Cal Mayor to the west of the Plaza Mayor, surrounded by fine buildings, including the old town hall built in 1640. Looks like school is just out, with lots of nice kids heading home. The fine statue here to Don Alvaro de Bazan records his legacy as a fine naval commander for Spain and Marquis of Santa Cruz. It is great to see some of Madrid's very oldest buildings still very much lived in, which obviously contributes quite a lot to the very lively nature of the centre of Madrid. So let's leave the Cal Mayor, but have a look at its major markets before we go. The local market has a wonderful collection of food for sale, which of course is why the middle of Madrid is a lively lived-in city. So let's walk from the Cal Mayor into the Plaza Mayor, and this is where everything really happens, in the very middle of Madrid. It's the central place for all the major gatherings and functions that take place in the civic sense. A magnificent square where there is always something happening. The Plaza Mayor has been the scene of multitudinous events for centuries, with markets, bullfights, soccer games, public executions, and, during the Spanish Inquisition, public trials of supposed heretics and the executions of those condemned to death. The Plaza Mayor also has a ring of old and traditional shops and cafes under its porticos, bringing lots of life to the square. Each year, celebrations for San Isidro, the patron saint of Madrid, are also held here. Of course, the Plaza Mayor is now a major tourist attraction, visited by many thousands of tourists each year. There is also the famous bronze statue of King Philip III at the centre of the square, by Jean Boulogne and Pietro Tacca, famous sculptors of their day. The cafes around the square are quite good, although probably a bit on the touristy side. But we simply had to have a meal at the Plaza Mayor before we left Madrid. The shadows were lengthening as we walked back towards our hotel, through the centre of magnificent Madrid. We'd be sad to go, but we will be joining a coach tomorrow morning to head south of Madrid all the way to the Mediterranean and beyond. There will be a brief tour around some of the highlights of Madrid before we leave town, and these shots will follow with a commentary through a rather bad microphone from a tour guide on the coach. The next video I hope to show you will be the highlights of that journey south, such as the Alhambra and the magic of the Mediterranean, all the way west to Gibraltar. Until then, I hope you have enjoyed Magic Madrid. We certainly did.
Let's say finishing this tour around 5 p.m. In a moment I will be ready to introduce our local guide, who is of course a Madrileño, somebody from Madrid who knows it the best, because
you can see it now to the right. Naturally, when the royal family is in residence, we cannot show it to you. Front to your right. Part of the gardens to your right. On the left side, Pietro Tacca. But Pietro Tacca had a little big problem. If you're not told about it and you just look at it, you will say, well, it's just one of those pieces, But if you start thinking about it.
This famous statue of Philip IV in the Plaza de Oriente was deemed impossible to make by all but that genius mathematician Galileo. He first proposed that the statue should have a hollow front and a solid rear, but he then devised a steel bar divided into three, which would run from the horse's chest to the tail and the hind legs. Thus, the tail itself would also be attached to the base of the sculpture to provide the key secret to the horse's balance, seemingly standing on its hind legs only. This methodology would become the key to all future statues of horses standing on their rear legs, rearing up. But it needed Galileo to find the solution.
See, driving to the right, so we're out to Toledo then. The old way out. With a few exceptions, are all going back to the 16th and early 17th century. True, so I have to have great care. But there are very important antique shops here. But Duke of Olivares was Philip IV Prime Minister those days. Now the building is divided in two parts. This part, there are two entrances there. You see it. This part close to us now is a Council of State. The other side of the building is a general headquarters of the army. So this is the facade with the two entrances there of the early 17th century. This was one home in the old times. And in a moment we will be passing on the side of the Plaza Mayor. I was jostling about there. Both coffee shops and so here we're coming right into the Puerta del Sol, the Sungate Square. on the right-hand side, there's on the other side of that mall is the main shopping street, the Gran Via. So it's there to your left. That mall is where you have the department stores in connection with the main shopping street on the other side. Netherlands, from Spain, from Germany. The Impressionists, our great composer, used to come here, reside here when he ever came to Madrid, giving concerts here, piano concerts and all that. It's a palace hotel. In front to your left is the Ritz. These are two very traditional hotels in the city. And in a moment, on the right-hand side, we have the building of the Prado Museum. I would say is one of the few collections that I know, at least in Europe, that was not confiscated by a revolution or whatever. No, it was academy at every single Spanish-speaking country. And in front of the coach is a memorial to Queen Christina. She was the mother of us from all the world that are growing here. So it's a very lovely park, this one, the Royal Botanical Gardens. Immediately after the Botanical Gardens, we will be passing by the main facade of the Prado Museum. The Prado Museum, the architecture of it, is considered by the experts one of the top artists of the world, by the way. So on the right-hand side is the main facade of the Prado Museum. The painting gallery, and you have the memorial to Velázquez at the main entrance. Again, this door only opens for very special occasions when the sovereigns are coming here, the state visitors, whatever, otherwise it remains closed, the door there. The one to your right. There too, we are back at Neptune Square. It's the font of Neptune. We are passing again on the right-hand side the Ritz Hotel. On the left side of the memorial is the building of the Stock Exchange of Madrid. Immediately next on the right is the Navy Office. The Navy Office on the right-hand side. And all the block to your left, this enormous block here, is the Bank of Spain. That is the main bank of the country. The Bank of Spain on your left is the bank of all the banks in Spain. The post office. Again, you have the gate of Alcalá to your right. Lamps here that don't exist, many of them anymore. A few standing that are being used for other purposes, not homes anymore. Now it's still there because the bank bought it. There's a bank functioning there today. And here we're coming to the Gardens of the Discovery. And all the gardens on top of that was planted with soil that came from every single country in the New World, or from any country that be touching ceremony. All these authorities of all these different countries came one determined day here. Our king and queen were here too. They brought sacks with soil. There's two fountains left and right are not working at this moment, but when they are working, then we have the showers there. You can see they look exactly like the three vessels that Colombo took along with him on that trip. The Sleeping Mermaid. As I say, there was a mermaid memorial down to the right. Now, if you look in front of the coach, and to the left, there's a fountain there. Believe me, everything that is in front of you, everything there, was not there 30 years ago. This was the way out of Madrid to the north, where fields, maybe some isolated houses here and there, but no city at all. There's a huge building on Real Madrid Soccer Club, Real Madrid Stadium. But in Strua, it's insane to come here on the days of soccer. So all these are very modern monuments making reference to that event. It's a very interesting museum of archaeology. Now Spain has a very rich country amount of archaeology. The only problem is that archaeology is very expensive to work it out. But you know, this country of ours was probably, it opens only in the mornings. There's some very, very interesting works of art there too. All Greek and Roman styles. Artists usually inspired themselves to do the art in mythology. Before that had been, it is an old 18th century palace, used to be a private home then. Right now we have the War Office.
And as we head south towards the Mediterranean, it is time to say au revoir to magic Madrid.